Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, The Safest Place in the Three Worlds. Absorption in the pastimes of Krishna and his incarnations and pure devotees, given to us by Srila Prabhupada directly and by empowered disciples of his. Welcome to everyone out there in cyberspace, and especially everybody here, family. Okay, Sanatan Goswami wrote this beautiful prayer glorifying the Srimad-Bhagavatam. By meditating on it every day and trying to understand, we'll be given more and more empowerment to be able to hear and understand and apply what we hear in the Bhagavatam into our character and into our understanding, so that our vision of the world changes. Srimad-Bhagavata Mahima Stotram, and it goes like this. Sarvasyastrabdi piyusha sarvavedaika satpala Sarvasiddhanta Ratnaja Sarvalokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kali Dvandoditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvadevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nistadaga Madbhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadhu tadayin ati nicho chatakada hanamun chagadachin mam premna rit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So going deeper into the Uddhava Gita, Lord Krishna is now explaining and giving a description of the Varnasrama Dharma to Uddhava. We're on the 17th chapter of the 11th canto, and beginning with text 36. A Brahmana, observing the great vow of celibacy, becomes brilliant like fire, and by serious austerity burns to ashes the propensity to perform material activities. Free from the contamination of material desire, he becomes my devotee. Purport. The process of liberation is described in this verse. Once, when Srila Prabhupada was traveling by airplane a fellow passenger who happened to be a priest, told him that he had seen his disciples and found them bright-faced. Srila Prabhupada was fond of relating this incident. The spirit soul is more brilliant than the sun, and the process of spiritual purification gradually takes effect. As the process of spiritual purification gradually takes effect, even the external form of a devotee becomes effulgent. The glowing fire of spiritual knowledge burns to ashes the mentality of sense gratification, and one naturally becomes austere and disinterested in mundane enjoyment. Among all austerities, the best is celibacy, by which the shackles of material life immediately become slackened. One who is amala, free from material desire, is known as a pure devotee of the Lord. On the paths of jnana, karma, and yoga, the mind retains the concept of personal interest. But on the path of pure devotion, the mind is trained to see only the interests of the personality of Godhead. Thus, a pure devotee of the Lord is amala, completely pure. Text 37. A brahmachari who has completed his Vedic education and desires to enter household life should offer proper remuneration to the spiritual master, bathe, cut his hair, put on proper clothes, take off his deerskin, and so on. Then, taking permission from the Guru, he should go back to his home. Purport. This verse describes the process called samavartana, or returning to one's home after finishing Vedic education in the ashram of the spiritual master. One who cannot concentrate all of his desires in the devotional service of the Lord is attracted to householder life. And if this attraction is not regulated, one will fall down. Being covered by the ignorance of fruitive activities and mental speculation, a living entity seeks enjoyment outside the devotional service of the Supreme Lord and becomes a non-devotee. One who takes to family life must rigidly follow the Vedic rules and regulations in order to avoid the collapse of his spiritual determination. One who enjoys intimate sense gratification with women must become duplicitous in his dealings with others, and consequently falls down from the platform of simple, pure life. When the mind is disturbed by lust, one begins to resent the principle of submission to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his pure devotee. And the dark clouds of one's offensive mentality completely cover the light of spiritual knowledge. One should dovetail his propensity to love someone by serving the lotus feet of a pure devotee. As stated in Vedic literature, one who worships Govinda, Lord Krishna, but does not worship his devotees, is not to be considered an advanced Vaishnava. Rather, he is to be considered a proud hypocrite. Text 38. A brahmachari desiring to fulfill his material desires should live at home with his family, and a householder who is eager to purify his consciousness should enter the forest. Whereas a purified brahmana should accept the renounced order of life. One who is not surrendered to me should move progressively from one ashram to another, never acting otherwise. Purport. Those who are not surrendered to devotees of the Lord must rigidly observe the regulations governing one's authorized social status. There are 4 social divisions of life, namely brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. One who wants to fulfill material desires should become an ordinary householder, grihastha, establish a comfortable residence, and maintain his family. One desiring to accelerate the process of purification may give up his home and business and live in a sacred place with his wife, as indicated here by the word vanam, or forest. There are many sacred forests in India meant for this purpose, such as Vrindavan and Mayapur. The word Dvijotama indicates the Brahmanas. Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas are all Dvija, or initiated, in the Gayatri mantra. But the Brahmana is Dritotama, or the highest among those who have received second birth by spiritual initiation. It is recommended that a purified Brahmana take to the renounced order of life, sannyas, giving up further contact with his so-called wife. The Brahmana is specifically mentioned here, since Kshatriyas and Vaishyas are not to take the renounced order of life. Even so, there are many stories in the Bhagavatam wherein great kings retire with their aristocratic wives to the forest to practice the austerities of vanaprastha and thus accelerate the process of purification. The Brahmanas, however, may directly accept the renounced order of life. The words ashamad, ashamang, gachet indicate that one may progressively move from brahmachari life to grihastha life, to vanaprastha life, and then to sannyas. The words ashamad, ashamam emphasize that one should never remain without an authorized social status, nor should one go backward, falling down from a higher position. Those who are not surrendered devotees of the Lord must rigidly observe such injunctions, for otherwise they will quickly become degraded, and their sins will place them outside the bounds of authorized human civilization. Lord Krishna emphasizes here that a non-devotee must rigidly observe the rituals and regulations of Vedic social divisions, whereas the Lord's pure devotee, engaged 24 hours a day in Lord Krishna's mission, is transcendental to such divisions. If, however, one performs illicit activities on the strength of being transcendental to Vedic social divisions, one is revealed to be a materialistic neophyte and not an advanced devotee of the Lord. An advanced devotee who remains aloof from material sense gratification is not bound by the Vedic social divisions. Thus, even a householder may live very austerely, traveling and preaching Krishna consciousness away from home, and even a sannyasi may sometimes engage women in the devotional service of Lord Krishna. The most advanced devotees cannot be restricted by the rituals and regulations of the Varnasrama system, and they move freely around the world, distributing love of Godhead. Matpada indicates a pure devotee of the Lord, who always keeps the Lord fixed in his heart and consciousness. One who falls down to become a victim of sense gratification is not fully established on the platform of Matpada, and should rigidly observe the social divisions and regulations to remain steady on the platform of pious human life. Text 39. One who desires to establish family life should marry a wife of his own caste, who is beyond reproach and younger in age. If one desires to accept many wives, he must marry them after the first marriage, and each wife should be of a successively lower caste. Purport. As stated in the Vedic literature, Tisro Varnanupurvyena Dvai Tataika Yatakramam Brahmana Kshatriya Vishwam Bharyak Swat Shudrajanmanaha. The purport of this verse is that one's first wife must always be sadrishim, or similar to oneself. In other words, an intellectual man should marry an intellectual wife. A heroic man should marry a heroic wife. A business-minded man should marry a woman who can encourage him in such activities, and a Shudra should marry a less intelligent woman. The wife should be beyond reproach in terms of her background and character, and should always be younger than oneself, ideally 5 to 10 years younger. If one desires to marry a second wife, then, as stated in this verse, by the word Varna, Nupurvyena, and in a verse spoken by Lord Krishna by the word Anukramat, one must wait until the first marriage is established and then select a second wife from the next lower caste. If one marries a third time, the wife must be again from the next lower caste. For example, a Brahmana's first wife will be a Brahmani. His second wife will be from the Kshatriya community. His third wife from the Vaishya community, and so forth. And fourth wife from the Shudra community. A Kshatriya may first marry a Kshatriya lady, then Vaishya and Shudra ladies. A Vaishya can accept wives from two classes, and a Shudra will accept a wife only from the Shudra class. By this progression of marriages, there will be relative peace in the family. These Vedic marriage injunctions are mentioned in the previous as mentioned in the previous verse, are especially for those who are not pure devotees of the Lord. Text 40. All twice-born men, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Vaishyas, must perform sacrifice, study the Vedic literature, and give charity. Only the Brahmanas, however, accept charity, teach the Vedic knowledge, and perform sacrifice on behalf of others. Purport. All civilized men must participate in sacrificial performances, give charity, and study the Vedic literature. The best of the twice-born, namely the Brahmanas, are specifically empowered to lead sacrificial performances on behalf of all members of society, teach everyone Vedic knowledge, and receive everyone's charity. Without the assistance or participation of qualified Brahmanas, the lower classes cannot properly study the Vedic literature, perform sacrifices, or give in charity, because they do not have the required intelligence to perfectly execute such functions. When Kshatriyas and Vaishyas take shelter of bona fide Brahmanas, they are able to properly execute their respective duties, and society functions smoothly and efficiently. A Brahmana who considers that accepting charity from others will destroy his austerity, spiritual influence, and fame, should maintain himself by the other two Brahminical occupations, namely teaching Vedic knowledge and performing sacrifice. If the Brahmana considers that those two occupations also compromise his spiritual position, then he should collect rejected grains in the agricultural fields and live without any dependence on others. Purport. A pure devotee of the Lord should always remember that the Supreme Personality of Godhead will personally take care of him. As the Lord states in the Bhagavad Gita 9:22, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye janak payupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogak chemam vaham yaham. But those who worship me with devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and preserve what they have. A Brahmana should not become a professional beggar for his personal maintenance. In India, there are many so-called Brahmanas who sit at the gates of important temples and beg from everyone who comes and goes. If someone does not give a donation, they become angry and chase that person. It's going on. Similarly, in America, there are many big preachers who collect huge amounts of money by begging on television and radio, and then they get jet airplanes and on and on and on. If a Brahmana or Vaishnava considers that being a professional beggar is weakening his austerity, destroying his spiritual influence, and giving him a bad reputation, then he should give up that process. One may beg everyone to contribute to the cause of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but one will be diminished in austerity, influence, and reputation by begging for one's personal livelihood. The superior path, don't ask anything from anybody. And then it comes, if you're actually Krishna conscious. A Brahmana may then take up the task of teaching Vedic knowledge and performing sacrifice. But even such occupations do not bring one to the highest platform of trust in God. A Brahmana who teaches as a means of livelihood may often be curbed in his teaching. and one who performs sacrifice may be manipulated by materialistic worshippers. In this way, a Brahmana may be placed in an embarrassing and compromised position. Therefore, a high-class Brahmana or Vaishnava ultimately will depend completely on the mercy of the Lord for his maintenance. The Lord promises to maintain his devotee, and an advanced devotee never doubts the word of the Lord. Text 42. The body of a Brahmana is not intended to enjoy insignificant material sense gratification. Rather, by accepting difficult austerities in his life, a Brahmana will enjoy unlimited happiness after death. Hare Krishna. Purport, and even before death. Purport. One may ask why a Brahmana should voluntarily accept inconvenience in keeping his body and soul together. In this verse, the Lord explains that advanced human life is meant for serious austerity and not for insignificant sense gratification. By spiritual advancement, one is fixed in transcendental bliss on the spiritual platform and gives up useless absorption in the temporary material body. One should remain detached from the material body, accepting only the bare necessities of life. The Brahmanas, by accepting a troublesome form of livelihood, never forget that the material body is destined to grow old, become diseased, and die in misery. Thus, remaining alert and transcendental, an advanced Brahmana at the end of his life, and at the end of this life, goes back home, back to Godhead, where he enjoys unlimited spiritual bliss. Without such higher awareness, how can one be considered a qualified Brahmana? Those devotees engaged 24 hours a day in spreading the mission of Lord Krishna are beyond the platform of renunciation or sense gratification because they engage everything in Lord Krishna's service. The pure devotee of the Lord eats only to get strength for serving the Lord and does not accept either sumptuous or meager food simply for the body's sake. However, everything may be accepted for the Lord, even sumptuous meals. A Brahmana who is not working day and night to spread the glories of the Lord should feel embarrassed to eat sumptuously for his personal sense gratification. But a renounced Vaishnava preacher may accept invitations from all classes of pious people, and just to bless their homes, he will eat the opulent foods they offer to him. Similarly, he sometimes eats sumptuously to get strength for defeating atheists and impersonalists. As stated in Vedic literature, one cannot be a highly qualified Brahmana unless one becomes a devotee of the Lord. And among the devotees, those who are preaching Krishna consciousness are the best, as confirmed by the Lord himself in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Text 43. A Brahmana householder should remain satisfied in mind by gleaning rejected grains from agricultural fields and marketplaces. Keeping himself free of personal desire, he should practice magnanimous religious principles, with consciousness absorbed in me. In this way, Brahmana may stay at home as a householder without very much attachment and thus achieve liberation. Purport. Mahantam refers to magnanimous religious principles such as very hospitably receiving guests, even those who are uninvited and unexpected. Householders must always be magnanimous and charitable to others, being alert to curb unnecessary affection and attachment in family life. In the past, very renounced Brahmana householders would collect grains that had fallen on the ground in the marketplace, or those that had been left behind in the fields after harvesting. The most important item here is Mai Arpitatma, or fixing the mind in Lord Krishna. Despite his material situation, anyone who constantly meditates upon the Lord can become a liberated soul. as stated in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2, 187, Iha yasya harer dasye karmana manasa gira nikila swap abastasu jivan mukta sa uchate. A person acting in Krishna consciousness, or in other words, in the service of Krishna, with his body, mind, intelligence, and words, is a liberated person, even within the material world, although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities. Text 44. Just as a ship rescues those who have fallen into the ocean, similarly, I very quickly rescue from all calamities those persons who uplift brahmanas and devotees suffering in a poverty-stricken condition. Purport. The Lord has described how brahmanas and devotees achieve the perfection of life, and now a similar perfection is offered to those who utilize their materialistic wealth to relieve the poverty-stricken condition of devotees and brahmanas. Although one may neglect the devotional service of the Lord to pursue a material life of sense gratification, one can rectify one's position by dedicating one's hard-earned money to the service of the Lord. Seeing the difficult austerities accepted by saintly persons, a pious person should make arrangements for their comfort, just as a boat saves hopeless people who have fallen into the ocean. Similarly, the Lord uplifts persons who have hopelessly fallen into the ocean of material attachment if they have been charitable to the brahmanas and the devotees. Text 45. Just as the chief bull elephant protects all other elephants in his herd and defends himself as well, similarly, a fearless king, just like a father, must save all of the citizens from difficulty and also protect himself. Memo to Trump. Purport. Lord Krishna, having concluded his discussion of Brahminical duties, now describes the character and activities of a king. You want to be a king? Listen up. Protecting all of the citizens from difficulty is an essential duty for the king. Protecting all of the citizens from difficulty is an essential duty of the king. Text 46. An earthly king who protects himself and all citizens by removing all sins from his kingdom will certainly enjoy with Lord Indra in airplanes as brilliant as the sun. Text 47. If a brahmana cannot support himself through his regular duties and is thus suffering, he may adopt the occupation of a merchant and overcome his destitute condition by buying and selling material things. If he continues to suffer extreme poverty, even as a merchant, then he may adopt the occupation of a kshatriya, taking sword in hand. But he cannot in any circumstances become like a dog, accepting an ordinary master. Purport. Shwavritya, or a dog's profession, refers to the Shudras who cannot live without accepting a master. A destitute brahmana who is suffering intolerably may become a merchant and then a kshatriya, but may never take the position of a Shudra by working in a company or accepting a master. Although a kshatriya is ordinarily considered more elevated than a Vaishya, the Lord here recommends that distressed brahmanas first accept the Vaishya occupation, since it is not violent. Text 48. A king or other member of the royal order who cannot maintain himself by his normal occupation may act as a Vaishya, may live by hunting, or may act as a brahmana by teaching others Vedic knowledge. But he may not under any circumstances adopt the profession of a Shudra. 49. A Vaishya or mercantile man who cannot maintain himself may adopt the occupation of a Shudra. And a Shudra, whoops, there's and. You have an S in the, is it S-A-N-D? No, it's in the book, it's okay. Okay. A Vaishya or mercantile man who cannot maintain himself may adopt the occupation of a Shudra, and a Shudra who cannot find a master can engage in simple activities like making baskets and mats of straw. However, all members of society who have adopted inferior occupations in emergency situations must give up those substitute occupations when the difficulties have passed. Text 50. One in the Grihastha order of life should daily worship the sages by Vedic study, the forefathers by offering the mantra Swadha, the demigods by chanting Swaha, all living entities by offering shares of one's meals, and human beings by offering grains and water. Thus, considering the demigods, sages, forefathers, living entities, and human beings to be manifestations of my potency, one should daily perform these 5 sacrifices. Purport. The Lord again discusses the duties of those in the household life, order of life. Obviously, the 5 ritualistic daily sacrifices mentioned here are meant for those who are not pure devotees of the Lord and who thus have to counteract their exploitation of material nature by the above mentioned sacrifices. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, is training householders, sannyasis, brahmacharis, and vanaprasthas to engage 24 hours a day in the loving service of the Lord. Those who are full-time missionary workers in ISKCON have no further obligations or sacrifices to perform, as confirmed in the 11th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, 11.5.41. Devarshi bhutaptinrinam pritrinam nakinkuro nayam rini charajan sarvatmana yak sharanam sharanyam kato mukundam parihrityakartam. Anyone who has taken shelter at the lotus feet of Mukunda, the giver of liberation, giving up all kinds of obligation, and is taken to the path in all seriousness, owes neither duties nor obligations to the demigods, sages, general living entities, family members, humankind, or forefathers. Text 51. A householder should comfortably maintain his dependence, either with money that comes of its own accord or with that gathered by honest execution of one's duties. According to one's means, one should perform sacrifices and other religious ceremonies. Purport. The Lord here describes the religious duties that are to be performed as far as possible according to one's means and when there is opportunity. Text 52. A householder taking care of many dependent family members should not become materially attached to them, nor should he become mentally unbalanced, considering himself to be the Lord. An intelligent householder should see that all possible future happiness, just like that which he already has experienced, is temporary. Purport. A family man often acts like a lord, protecting his wife, ordering his children, maintaining servants, grandchildren, domestic animals, and so forth. The words na pramadyat kutum yapi indicate that although one acts like a little lord, surrounded by his family, servants, and friends, one should not through false pride, become mentally unbalanced, considering oneself to be the actual Lord. So now we know what actual imbalance means. The word vipatschit indicates that one should remain sober and intelligent, never forgetting oneself to be the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. Householders of the upper, middle, and lower classes become attached to different types of sense gratification. In any economic or social class, however, one should remember that all material enjoyment, either here or in the next life, is temporary and ultimately useless. A responsible householder should guide his family members and other dependents back home, back to Godhead, for an eternal life of bliss and knowledge. One should not become a false and puffed up Lord for a brief span of time, for then one will remain bound up, along with his family members, in the cycle of repeated birth and death. Text 53. The association of children, wife, relatives, and friends is just like the brief meeting of travelers. With each change of body, one is separated from all such associates, just as one loses the objects one possesses in a dream when the dream is over. Purport. That point's been repeated quite a few times in this book. Purport. Panta Sangama indicates the momentary association of travelers at hotels, restaurants, tourist spots, or in more traditional cultures, fresh water wells and walking paths. We are now associated with many relatives, friends, and well-wishers, but as soon as we change our material body, we will immediately be separated from all these associates, just as upon awakening, we are immediately separated from the imaginary situation of a dream. One becomes attached to the sense gratification of one's dream, and similarly, under the spell of the illusory concepts of I and mine, we become attached to so-called relatives and friends who gratify our sense of false ego. Unfortunately, such fleeting, egoistic association covers our real knowledge of the self and the Supreme, and we remain hovering in material illusion, futilely endeavoring for permanent sense gratification. One who remains attached to the bodily concept of family and friends cannot possibly give up the false egoism of I and mine, or I am everything and everything is mine. Without giving up material sense gratification, we cannot become steady on the transcendental platform of devotional service, and therefore we cannot relish the actual flavor of eternal happiness. Unless one becomes a pure devotee of the Lord, accepting Lord Krishna as one's only friend, one cannot give up the hankering for temporary and superficial material relationships. A traveler far away from his home and loved ones may strike up superficial conversations with other travelers, but such relationships have no ultimate meaning. One should therefore revive one's lost relationship with Lord Krishna. We are constitutionally part and parcel of Lord Krishna, who is the reservoir of all spiritual pleasure, and our original relationship with him is full of love and happiness. But because of our desire to enjoy independently from him, we fall down into the confusing, meaningless network of material relationships created by Maya. An intelligent person realizes there is no actual pleasure or satisfaction for the soul on either this planet or any other material planet. Therefore, like a weary traveler, exhausted from his journey, he should go back home, back to Godhead, for eternal peace as the faithful servant of Lord Sri Krishna. Hare Krishna. Text 54. Deeply considering the actual situation, a liberated soul should live at home just like a guest, without any sense of proprietorship or false ego. In this way, he will not be bound or entangled by domestic affairs. Purport. The word mukta, or liberated, refers to one freed from all material attachment. In this status, called mukta sangha, one no longer identifies oneself as a permanent resident of the material world. This liberated status may be attained even by one situated in family life. The only requirement is that one should take up a serious program of Krishna Sankirtan, which includes constant chanting of the holy names of the Lord, worship of the deity, and participation in the Krishna consciousness movement. Haribo, Prabhupada ki jai. Without a serious program of Krishna Sankirtan, it is very difficult to give up the iron shackles of attachment to women and the byproducts of such attachments. Text 55. A householder devotee who worships me by execution of his family duties may remain at home, go to a holy place, or, if he has a responsible son, take sannyas. Purport. This verse describes the three alternatives for a householder. He may continue at home, or he may take vanaprastha, which involves going to a sacred place with one's wife, or if he has a responsible son to take over his family duties, he may take sannyas, the renounced order, for a definitive solution to the problems of life. In all three ashramas, ultimate success depends on sincere surrender to the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the most important qualification one can have is Krishna consciousness. Text 56. But a householder whose mind is attached to his home and who is thus disturbed by ardent desires to enjoy his money and children, who is lusty after women, who is possessed of a miserly mentality, and who unintelligently thinks everything is mine and I am everything, is certainly bound in illusion. Purport. Although one may try by various analytical or psychological processes to detach the mind from illusory family attachment, one will inevitably be drawn back into the network of material attachment unless the heart is purified by Krishna consciousness. A miserly householder thinks only of his own family or community without mercy for outsiders. Being egoistic, lusty, attached, and always disturbed by ardent desires to enjoy money and children, a materialistic householder is hopelessly bound in a web of anxiety. Text 57. O my poor elderly parents, and my wife with a mere infant in her arms, and my other young children, without me, they have absolutely no one to protect them and will suffer unbearably. How could my poor relatives possibly live without me? You know, when Prabhupada, before he took sannyas, he wrote a poem, or I think it was an offering. And in the offering he said, "What do I have left? Just a list of names." Text 58. Thus, because of his foolish mentality, a householder whose heart is overwhelmed by family attachment is never satisfied. constantly meditating on his relatives, he dies and enters into the darkness of ignorance. Purport. Adam Bishate Tama indicates that in his next life, an attached householder will certainly be degraded because of his primitive mentality of bodily attachment, which is called mudha di. In other words, after enjoying the sense gratification of considering oneself the center of everything, one enters into a lower species of life. You get too attached to your house, and you'll end up a cockroach in the same house in your next life. It happens. Somehow or other, one must fix our minds on Lord Krishna and come out of the darkness of ignorance to our real life in Krishna consciousness. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 11th canto, 17th chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Krishna's Description of the Varnasrama System. So, this is a very, very intense and extremely important section of Krishna's teaching to Uddhava. And those of us who have been, raised in America at this time, we may shake our heads and say, "What? Are you kidding me? Impossible!" And all those things that the mind conjures up as you're reading this, But, if we could just put it into proper perspective, that the human life, without this point being fixed in the mind and the understanding, it's not possible to understand the actual details of the Varnasrama system. And Prabhupada, many times in his purports in other sections of the Bhagavatam, makes the point, it's actually not possible now to execute all these detailed formulas of the Varnasrama now at this time in the history of the earth. We have to make the best use of a bad bargain and try our best to do what we can of these principles, but mainly to just surrender to Krishna, chant Hare Krishna, and be happy. And they may sound like escapism, but it's not. There were 2 morning walks. One was in Mayapur and one was in Vrindavan. I think it was 1976. Yeah, 76. And there, the devotees were interrogating Prabhupada on these points. Because the 7th canto had just come out, and in the 7th canto there's a lot of these kinds of details. Although this Uddhava Gita is incredible, isn't it? Because it gets into, remember when he was talking about the different levels of devotees, Kanishta, Madhyam, Uttam, Adhikari, and the levels of details about how to understand, who's who and who's what, was, I think, more detailed than any other part of Prabhupada's books. It's amazing. And here we have really a lot of intimate details about the Varnasrama system. But the point is that the whole purpose of it is to have a peaceful atmosphere so that all the members of human society can think of Krishna and go back to Krishna. So I'm going to stop the reading here. It's a little early, but there's a lot in here, and I thought once we started the flow of the conversation, we may get a lot of ideas going or flowing here. You can still do it. Okay. Yes, our local saints, Vanaprastha in the householder, sannyasi ashram all at once. Sarvabhauma, he's going to explain to us what we just heard. In case you didn't notice, he's beyond the Varnasrama system.
In text 44, there's a verse that says how the Lord protects devotees from calamities. Just as a ship rescues those who have fallen into the ocean, Similarly, I very quickly rescue from all calamities those persons who uplift brahmanas and devotees suffering in a poverty-stricken condition. So my question is, I read how there was a couple famines when the British were ruling India in the 1800s, where a lot of Indian people starved, and partly it was the British people's fault because where the railroads, the British actually took grains away from India at that time to help the World War II effort. So, but I was just surprised because, the people of India are pious, so this verse says how Krishna would protect. Of course, sometimes the people from India stray from Dharma also. So I just...
Hey, this is a long way into the Kali Yuga, what you're talking about. These principles are long gone by this time. So we say they're piety, and there's still a, what's the word? Remnants. There's remnants of it, but it's been destroyed by Mayavada philosophy, mainly, and it's been calcified, if you want to use the term calcified, by applying the caste system according to birth, and calcifying the social mobility and all those different things. People that had a certain quality to work, they weren't allowed to because they were born in a certain place. Just like now we see in America, if you're born in a certain inner city situation, and you may not even see the light of the day, and these principles seem like far, far away, because they are. They are. So, piety is relative. It is Punya Bhumi, it's the land of piety, because everybody has more or less some, knowledge of Krishna, and everywhere you go, you see Krishna on the signboards. They name their shops and they label their lorries, that means trucks, with all the names of Krishna and the demigods. The culture is there, but they're not following these principles. And when you read the principles the way they're actually supposed to be done, as we just did, then you see how far the human society has strayed away. And you can see how it is that there's so much chaos in the world. I mean, when we went to India first in 1975, Prabhupada went back in 67, and then he took his Western devotees in 71. I went in 75 for the first time. And India was like so much different than America. It was like night and day. When you saw it with your own eyes, you just wondered how Prabhupada could cross over all the cultural barriers to be able to come to America, especially New York and Haight-Ashbury and San Francisco, in 1965, 66, 67, and be able to relate to young people and attract them, telling them, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. It's completely mystical. It's Krishna arranging it. So the only way I can answer that question is Krishna is arranging everything, actually. Krishna is actually in control of everything. And everyone is getting exactly what they deserve, individually and collectively, according to what they've done and the combination and permutations of the reactions of what everyone's done, and then they all meet together, and then they become exponentially more complicated and more complicated. And over 6 million years or billion years in the one day of Brahma, it gets very complicated by the Kali Yuga, in each Kali Yuga. So I think that's the answer to the question. The piety that you see is kind of cosmetic now, but you look at the heart. I mean, in India, what is it? Power. That's what, what's the word? Levels of, influence, and levels of privilege, and levels of facility. It's all granted by power.
I heard one lecture by Tamal Krishnaraj. He was saying that sometimes in India, because the culture does have high knowledge, but sometimes the people, they should know better, but when they violate Dharma, they might be getting a heavy reaction sometimes.
It's true, but I hang my hat on Prabhupada's revelation to us that this is one of the reasons why Krishna gave Lord Shiva the instruction to come as a Brahmana and mislead human society into Mayavad philosophy. And then he laughed at us, Westerners, and he said, and you all got the blessings of Lord Shiva because you're no longer so attached to your families as they are in the pious cultures. And therefore you could all just come and just give everything up and just surrender to the Krishna consciousness movement. There's a nice example in Shivaram Maharaj's book, which I edited many, many years ago. It's called Harnina Chintam. Can't remember the name of the book. I'm going. 73, 10, 9, 8. Oh. What's the name of that book? I can't remember the name of the book, and I edited it. Anyway, it's kind of an exposition of the whole philosophy. You can use it as kind of like a syllabus for explaining the whole philosophy. And when he gets into the description of mixed and pure devotional service, you remember when we were reading? It kept coming back to pure devotional service. Pure devotional service means you give yourself to Krishna exclusively. Unless that's your intention. You may not be pure yet, but if that's your intention, if you don't have an ulterior motive for coming to the movement, just to escape the difficulties of not having money or whatever, improving yourself in some way, and then when you get a little better, or even health or strength or whatever, then you go away after you get those things. But if you're actually dedicated to Krishna, surrendered to Krishna, and the goal is to, that's pure devotion. And mixed devotional service is when there's other things involved. So he used the example of pious Indian families who are externally more pious. They can follow the regulative principles easier than Westerners, right? And the cultural things are easier for them to do training from the very beginning. They study Bhagavad Gita as students in a school, sometimes even Sanskrit in the beginning. Prabhupada did. He had Sanskrit a little bit in the beginning, but they're so attached to the structure that when it came time to join Prabhupada, when he called them, he couldn't do it. And still it's hard for them to do. But the Westerners, fallen, in some ways more fallen, more difficult to follow regular principles, having done sinful activities their whole lives, by the mercy, Prabhupada said, of Shankaracharya, they were able to just chuck it in and just join. And Prabhupada molded them into a juggernaut. He used to call us his army of monkeys. Look what Lord Ram did with the army of monkeys. Of course, these were not ordinary monkeys. We were ordinary persons, but it's like that. In other words, these things that you're hearing here in these chapters, they're not stereotyped. They're not meant to be applied in a stereotyped way. And if a person's not doing this or is doing this, then you shut them off or shut them on, or it's not like that. Each person has to be judged by their qualifications, their capacities, and that can change during their life as they become more qualified or less qualified. It's not rigid. That's what the caste system means. Everything's rigid. Everybody's put in a box. in the beginning of their life, and they're caught in that box. That's why America, although it's fallen in some ways, still, it was the #1 destination for years and years. Now they may stop it, but anyway, for years and years and years and years, it's the #1 destination for people to come and try to get better lives because it's freer. And Prabhupada loved America. Why? Because when he was in India, he couldn't get anything done, but when he came here, then the young Westerners joined him, and he was able to get away with it, because the government gave more facility. It did.
Even to get a P form and all that, just to come to America was a big hassle for Prabhupada.
Yeah, now I'll tell you now. Anyway, won't go into the details, but now there's somebody, I won't mention names, who by executive order is revamping the immigration system, not just illegal immigrants, but legal immigration. He's revamping the whole thing, and it's all going to be based on money and skill and all those things, and the people that they need to do the labor, is going to be. It's going to anyway. I don't know how long time it's going to take to see it clearly, but it's going to cause a disturbance. Did you have something? Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thinking about this verse that I've heard that by serving a karmini in their opportunity to enjoy their senses, that's a foolish endeavor, and just by helping them, we ourselves become a fool. Is there still a reason for a devotee to, when they see these false brahmanas that we were just reading about, to still bow down to them because of the fact that by appreciating a devotee, someone makes spiritual progress?
Well, there's a principle that pervades the Vedic culture, and that is respect for authority. So elderly people who are in, elevated positions of authority, sannyasis. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas because he couldn't get the students and the Mayavadis to take Krishna consciousness from him. So he took sannyas because the sannyas position, people just in India, they naturally show respect. So yeah, there is, and even in the system of sacrifice, Vedic sacrifice, all the Shudras, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Brahmanas, they would take part in different ways. The worker class would build the yagyashalas and fashion the tools, the implements out of, wood or gold or whatever. But then they had to be transformed into spiritual articles by the Yajurveda. The Adivara priests would speak mantras over them, and they would turn them into spiritual articles. And in that way, the Shudras who were doing the work to make those things, they would be connected, and they would become uplifted, and they would participate, and they become purified by being a part of the sacrifice. Now, it's chanting Hare Krishna, the ultimate sacrifice. Jagya Sankirtana Prayo, Yajantihi Sumedasaha. There's only one sacrifice in the age of Kali, and that's the chanting of Hare Krishna and the hearing of Srimad-Bhagavatam and the offering of food to Krishna. So, yes, there is some, but at the same time, if one is in knowledge and then bows his head, or if it's done as a formality and one is not submitting oneself to hearing from persons who are contaminated, even if they're in a higher position, then you can get away with it. But if you become influenced by people who are contaminated, just because they're in a higher position, then you'll become bewildered. Sorry, is that okay? What I just said, is it okay? Okay. Yes, Patrick.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I'm just going to read a little bit from a purport on 11.
Patrick can't do this because...
Alright, this is the purport 11/17/53. A traveler far away from his home and loved ones may strike up superficial conversations with other travelers, but such relationships have no ultimate meaning. One should therefore revive one's lost relationship with Lord Krishna. We are constitutionally part and parcel of Lord Krishna, who is the reservoir of all spiritual pleasure, and our original relationship with him is full of love and happiness. But because of our desire to enjoy independently from him, we fall down into the confusing, meaningless network of material relationships created by Maya. An intelligent person realizes there is no actual pleasure or satisfaction for the soul on either this planet or any other material planet. Therefore, like a weary traveler exhausted from his journey, he should go back home, back to Godhead, for eternal peace as a faithful servant of Lord Sri Krishna. That's such a nice purport statement. I was just, seeing in the path of bhakti, as we're progressing more and more, seeing how much I do place myself in the center of a lot of every interaction. And I just hope someday that this process will be able to melt my heart a little bit to have Krishna in the center of my endeavors.
So be it. May it be true, may it come true. And doing this, what we're doing right now, going in front of the deities and bowing down and chanting Sankirtan with devotees and welcoming new people, and preaching of Krishna and spreading of Krishna consciousness. This is what it means now to go back home, back to Godhead. And the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, may be the only institution that's really seriously doing this, in line with Prabhupada, in line with Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada is, to liken it to, he's the essence of all the teaching, the previous teachings of the previous acharyas are coming through Prabhupada. And so as the founder of the movement, he's giving us a shelter. And all of us who are acting as his representatives must take shelter of his line and keep us safe. It's not coming through the sound.
Just a moment ago.
While I was speaking?
Just after it got turned back around.
Oh. Was that Rati?
Yeah,
Rati's she's like a tigress. If there's something wrong, she just goes for it, lets us know. It's great.
I've checked all the connections there.
How about this one?
Connection up one. Yesterday it did the thing. Oh, she said good again.
Yes, something else.
There was one text that talked about how a man can take a second and third wife and all that.
Huh.
So my question is, I heard that Prabhupada allowed that at one time, but then did not allow it in ISKCON.
He talked about it, but he didn't really allow it. He didn't allow it.
Yeah.
He talked about it. He talked about how, in principle, because the population of the female is always greater in the population than male. It's always been true. It's still true to this day. And therefore, if every woman needs to be married, then that has to be somehow or other accommodated. The Mormons are into this, Latter-day Saints. But then, what he said was, but it's not acceptable in present human society because it's against the laws of the state, of the secular, of the societies. And therefore, he said, don't do it. So it wasn't that he ever accepted it. Some devotees kind of like took license and started to do it based on those things he said about how it's not sinful to do in human society due to the rules of Varnasrama Dharma. But he never did say yes and then no, but when some people took it the wrong way and started to try to do that, he said no.
Yeah, I was just wondering if in the purports by the disciples, if in the future they would mention something that would balance it, like that in, just like what you said, that in places where it's against the law, then, or that Prabhupada didn't recommend it or something. I mean, it just presents it straight. The verse.
It is straight in Prabhupada's instructions to us.
Yeah, I just meaning here.
Well, these are the principles given in the Bhagavatam, and in those days it was possible, and now it's not possible. Prana, take us there. Go on, do it.
I just liked the point about, I liked a lot of points, but I liked this point about how the body of the Brahmana is not meant for insignificant sense gratification, but rather for difficult austerities by which he can have unending happiness in the next life. And I was thinking of the verse 551. How's that go? I forget the
fifth canto, fifth chapter,
canto.
first verse.
I forget how it starts. Anyways, Brahmasokyam Twanantam Tapodivyam Putra Kayena Satvam Shudyed.
Right.
That Rishabh tells his 100 sons that one should not live like the hogs and dogs, but rather perform divine austerities.
Yeah. Human life is meant for austerity. Everyone is meant to do austerity. And depending on the person, on the elevation of our, ability to do that, then we're categorized in these ways. The Shudra mentality, the Shudra qualification doesn't have the same abilities, we're talking about by birth, but by qualities and abilities, to do severe austerities. But they have austerities that they do. They stick with one wife, and they do different things. They're loyal to the master and honest and clean and all those. I was thinking when same thing you said. I was thinking of the descriptions of what human life is before you even get into spiritual life. In the 7th canto. And when I first read that, I said, my God, we're talking about a pure devotee. But no, it was talking about a human being. So to be able to actually think of Krishna all the time, you have to be a human being. You have to do all kinds of, preliminaries in order to be able to actually think. And that's the Varnasrama system. All these rules and regulations are not meant to be, done so rigidly and condemn others because they're not like this, and that's what made it fall down. Because the Brahmanas, they became proud. There was that one verse that said the Brahmanas shouldn't think that they're the Lord, or neither the householder should be thinking that they're the Lord of everything. Just because you're Lord of your house doesn't mean that you're Lord of everything. But once you get there, then you become disqualified, you know. So it's actually maybe our tendency as Westerners with pragmatic training in our school systems, in our, especially university educated persons, you know, may try to analyze this in a pragmatic way and try to figure out the formulas and rigidly apply them. But you can't anymore in the Kali Yuga. Prabhupada said that many times. But we have to try. Okay, there's another point that came out. Can I say something? Oh, all right. During those 2 walks, I think Vidanda Maharaj was one of the persons who was inquiring. And there was a number, but he was one of the prominent voices in the morning walk. And he was trying to understand how we should see each other. You know, because Prabhupada was saying that we need to organize ourselves in terms of Varnasrama. And Prabhupada kept having to bring back the conversation to we are not Shudras and Brahmanas and Vaishyas and all these designations. A Vaishnava is not in that designation, as long as he's actually a devotee of Krishna. Not that he's pretending to be a devotee, but one is actually a devotee of Krishna, initiated, performing the activities of devotional service, following the orders of a bona fide spiritual master. That person is a Vaishnava. And a Vaishnava is above the Varnasrama system. But in order to organize ourselves and help teach human society how to do this, we may act according to our conditioning or according to our propensities, ability to act in one way or another, or even against our natural abilities. We can act in that way as a Vaishnava. So he was repeating again and again, don't think that we're, Shudra Vaishnavas and, Brahmana Vaishnavas and such Vaishnavas and that Vaishnavas. The Vaishnava is transcendental. Of course, that doesn't mean you should think you're transcendental just because you say you're a Vaishnava. That's not true either. Then you'll misbehave, thinking you're whatever. Because what is the prime qualification of the Vaishnava? Humility. Humility. And the 13, 8 to 12. Knowledge. The first 2 are humility and pridelessness. So then at the end of the purport, Prabhupada says, knowledge begins with humility. If you're not humble, you cannot be knowledgeable. You can't actually be in knowledge.
Dr. Manjari has left comments in the...
Okay, Rati, go ahead. Take us there.
Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. I liked the verse where Lord Krishna said that a liberated person lives at home just like a guest, freed from any conception of ownership. Such a fresh and liberating perspective, and something to strive for, in my case. And she also has another comment.
Let me say one thing about that, first of all. That comment is very nice, and it means, what does it mean practically? I mean, that's what's the word? Theoretical. That's the theory. But practically it means you have to see everything as belonging to Krishna. The house belongs to Krishna and you are just a caretaker. And where do we find that most prominent? Krishna's queens. Because when Draupadi was asking all of Krishna's queens how they became Krishna's wives, at the end of describing how they got there, they said, and now Krishna has allowed me to come into his house as his maidservant. So everything belongs to Krishna. So to be in that state and to be in the household, then it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to Krishna. Your wife is Krishna's, the husband's Krishna's, children belongs to Krishna, and you just act like that and think like that. And then you transcend even from that position. And what is that famous verse? Swa swa Karman Abhibatat, 18th chapter, Swaswab. Do you remember the number, O Pandit? My memory is gone. I just read this yesterday. And maybe it was today. It was today. Sway Karman. Okay, I can find it. This is important. So I'm going to take the trouble. Oh. Sway. Do you remember this? It's right after the... yeah, maybe. Sway. It's SVE, isn't it? It's the last one. 1845. Sway, Karman Abhida Tak. By following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. Now, please hear from me how this can be done. And then there's a whole description. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all-pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work. So wherever you are in the Varnasrama system, if you do this, if you worship the Lord properly, then you can become perfect right from that position. And therefore, I tell you, it's going to be hard for me. My memories. Stani stita shutikatam tanuvan manobir. That's the verse that Lord Chaitanya accepted from Ramananda Roy when he was asking what's the perfection of life. And stay in your place. Stop speculating about what God is and hear from the proper source. Seriously. That's it. You don't have to change your position. But, as it is pointed out in these verses, it's more difficult to do when you're surrounded by aristocratic, loving relatives and you think you're king. It's more difficult. Prabhupada used to say it's like trying to fast by living in an icebox. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol, Hare Bol. See ya. Go back to your kingdom. Oh, go back to Krishna's kingdom. Hare Bol. Yes, Sarva. We must stimulate Sarva's intelligence because he's got all kinds of things tonight.
I'm sleeping, so I'm not. Can you elaborate a little bit more on? You said that Lord Shiva took the form like.
Oh yes.
To be bewildered. Yes. Why was that again?
Yes, Prabhupada said that Lord Shiva gave us the benediction. He was joking. This is not to be taken like some kind of philosophical, absolute, thing. But he was joking to us because one of the reasons why Lord Shiva taught the Mayavad philosophy was to loosen the morals and illicit sex and Varnasankara. And we were all Varnasankaras in the West. And therefore we weren't so attached to the structure, and therefore it was easier for us to give up, I mean, he came, just picture, he came just at the moment when the hippie movement, kind of the counterculture movement was coming into being in the east and west coast of America. And they were up to here with government and wars and, all the capitalism or communism. They were for free everything, And it came just at that moment, but it wasn't satisfying anybody. I mean, it wasn't satisfying me. I was there, Therefore, when I heard the right thing, I just immediately took it. It was like, that was it. Joined immediately, instantaneously. That's what Prabhupada meant when he said blessings of Lord Shiva, because we didn't have so much attachment for the structure. And that was one of the purposes. And why? Why? Because Kali Yuga, it was to progress the Kali Yuga so that those who have become fallen, by the time it gets to Kali Yuga, everybody's fallen practically, and to allow the modes of nature to give the fallen souls what they need, which is a stick. First of all, there's, philosophy, then there's gifts, then there's bribery, then there's position. These are all political ways of, conquering other people. And eventually there's the stick. Argument ad baculum. Argument ad baculum. It's the stick. And therefore you see now in the debate stage, everybody's just yelling at each other. And if you can't defeat the other person, you just yell at them, Call them names. You're this, you're that, it's like anything that resembles, some knowledge or some. In the Vedic age, if you debated somebody, they defeated you, you would immediately become their disciple. Immediately. And now it's all gone by the grace of Lord Shiva. That doesn't mean we should think, oh, that means that Lord Shiva is the person to surrender to. No, it's not like that.
In the big scheme of things, how does that help?
In the big scheme of things? In the big scheme of things, the population of Varnasankara increased. That's the big scheme of things. And what does Krishna say? Utsideri me loka na karyam kramachedaham sankarasya chakartaham upahanyami mapaja. It's in the Gita. He says, I don't have any duty to perform. I'm not attached to anything. I don't need anything. But still I perform my prescribed duty. Because if I didn't, other people would follow me, and I would be the cause of what? Unwanted population. How does unwanted population come into being? Illicit sex. Sometimes people think, oh, but illicit sex isn't in the Gita. Therefore, it must be okay. It's not. It's right there in the Gita. Sankara. I'm not going to go there. It's too late. It's almost 7:45 already. I knew this was going to happen. That's why I stopped early. Because this is so, practical and so interesting to us. How to live a life.
Would you like to say Pratimavari's question for tomorrow, or continue tonight?
No, go ahead. I forgot.
Okay. Tonight, we heard a lot about the fleeting nature of attachment and relations between family members, and the power of Maya, which makes the householder feel that it's never the right moment to leave home, because one's family still needs him in some way. I have a question about that. In our movement, we have seen many times that householders left their family to take sannyas, what seemed to be prematurely, causing apparently unnecessary pain and suffering to their wives and young children. I realize that this is a sensitive and multifaceted topic, but would you please elaborate a little on how we can develop a mature understanding on when is the right time to detach oneself from one's family and when it's artificial or premature escapism?
One has to be Krishna conscious. If you're not Krishna conscious, then no matter what you do, it's going to fall flat. You're going to fall flat on your face, whether you're a householder or a vanaprastha or a sannyasi or anything. But the thing is, Prabhupada explained that he needed sannyasis, and therefore he gave young men sannyas, and he knew they weren't all qualified. But he did it because it was needed. It was an emergency. We read in there that under emergency cases, certain people who are unqualified do other things will do other things under emergency. So that was the emergency. He had to start the movement. He had to structure it. You know, he had to get it going big enough and far enough so that it will keep going, and that was needed. So we have to be very careful not to criticize that. Even though it may have been that some people took sannyas early, it may have been that they fell down later on. We should be very careful to criticize that, because they got so much benefit from being part of the pioneering stage. We're still in the pioneering stage, but then it was really pioneering stage, very beginning. It's not a hard and it's not mechanical, it's not stereotyped. A person can take sannyas at 20 if he's actually qualified. Most aren't. Mostly you have to go through until you're older to take sannyas. But there was need. And when Prabhupada left this world, I was 31 years old. And I had been a devotee for 5 years. Only. And no one could have been a devotee for more than 12 years. Actually 11. In terms of initiation, nobody could have been a devotee for more than 11 years, initiated devotee for more than 11 years. And when Prabhupada left, we had to do everything. There had to be gurus, there had to be, managers of large parts of the earth. So you can say that, but a lot of the householders fell down. Don't pin the tail of the donkey of the sannyasis. The householders fell down, big time. It was very difficult. You're going to organize a worldwide movement where most people are in their 20s? What else could have happened? That's my argument. What else could have happened? Nothing else could have happened, so why criticize it? Just glorify those people. Even the ones who fell down, glorify them because they were exceptional. They got empowered by Prabhupada and they spread Krishna consciousness around the world. And that's what I have to say about that. And now I'm going to stop. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. Srila Prabhupada ka jai. Srimad-Bhagavatam. See you tomorrow night, same station, same time, here at the Live Studios in Radha Lane, Houston, Texas. Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava ki jai.